when you get ready to go into the street.
Regular
They should
meeting of
have
the Hammonton
sidewalk.
Planning Board and the Hammonton Zoning Board of Adjustments for August the 3rd, 2022, and now please come to order. A notice of this meeting has been properly posted on the bulletin board reserved for such notices on the first floor of Town Hall and mailed to 2 newspapers pursuant to law. To rear the council chamber, there is a diagram with the location of fire exits. Everyone attending this meeting should become familiar with them. If there is a fire, you may exit this building safely. There will be no smoking in Town Hall, and all cell phones will be silenced during this meeting. Thank you. Pledge allegiance to the flag.
Allegiance to the flag of the United States of America, and to the republic which stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Thank you.
What excuse does he give you guys for not having
The
some?
Secretary, please conduct the official roll call for August 3rd, 2022.
Ralph Capaccio. Michael Hozick.
Can't hear you there. Can you?
Michael Messina.
Present.
Gordon Faribault.
Present.
Mickey Palia.
Here.
Ray Schipione.
Here. Oh, Mile.
Councilman Oliva.
Here.
Councilman Willerman.
Here.
Bill Brinkerhoff.
Here.
Jonathan Bask. Chris Kalani. James Matro. And Chairman Marinelli.
Thank you. Here. Members of the board received a copy of July 6, 2022 minutes. If there are no additions or corrections to those minutes, entertain a motion to approve them as received.
So moved. I'll second it.
You have the first and second? All in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Anybody opposed? The minutes of July 6, 2022 are approved as received.
This is what they have right here.
Issues tonight, Hammonton Gardens.
That's just to get to the parking
631
area
Tilton
from the
Road,
building.
Post Office Box 865, Northfield, New Jersey. Block 1201, Lot 5 and 5.01. Adams Raymond Hagen file 1110-043.
Chairman.
Application 14-21 planning board.
Can you please move your...
Application is seeking approval to construct a...
Ed.
Yeah.
Yep.
Get
There
your
we
mic
go.
more in front of you.
Oh. Can you hear
Thank
me? Hear me now?
Good.
Applicant is seeking approval to construct 4 new apartment buildings, 84 units, to accompany the 5 existing apartment buildings, 52 units on the site, which is located in Hammonton's IDZ, Inclusionary Development zoning district. Additionally, parking and lighting improvements as well as associated site work. Yes, attorney, opening statement?
And thank you, Chairman Marinelli.
Chairman, if I could interrupt for a moment for the purpose of some information regarding the voting process. Mr. Schipione and Mr. Brinkerhoff were not at the last meeting. This is a continuation of that meeting. It's my understanding that Mr. Schipione has reviewed the meeting tape and is prepared to sign the certification saying Mr. Brinkerhoff has not had that opportunity, so he will not be able to vote on this continuing
Okay.
application.
All right, thank you, thank you. Attorney, continue.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Good evening, Chairman Marinelli, members of the board. As you might recall, my name is Sherilyn Walters. I'm a partner at the law firm of Nemad, Davis & Goldstein. We are counsel for Hammonton Gardens, LLC, the applicant before you this evening. As noted in your opening, Mr. Marinelli, the applicant seeks preliminary and final major site plan approval to permit the renovation of the 5 existing apartment buildings containing 52 units at the Hammonton Gardens complex located at 882 12th Street, Block 1201, Lots 5 and 5.01, as well as to permit the construction of 4 new apartment buildings with a total of 84 new units, all as contemplated in the IDZ zoning ordinance, which is an implementation element of the township's affordable housing plan. The applicant first appeared before the board on June 15th the board asked that the applicant return for another meeting in order to obtain feedback from various town departments and/or personnel, since we had not received any interdepartment communications or reports prior to the June 15th meeting. The board also asked at that time that we address some comments and feedback that was provided at the first meeting. At the end of the meeting on June 15th, the board made an announcement advising all interested members of the public that no further published or public notice would be provided, and that this hearing would be conducted on this date without any further notice from the applicant. Since that time, the applicant took the board's comments into consideration, made some effort to address the comments, and requested revisions. And tonight you'll see a revised plan exhibit, and we'll hear testimony from the applicant's engineer detailing the changes the applicant is able to make to the plan. In addition, there are updated renderings of the clubhouse and existing building renovations, which our architect will review with you. All of the exhibits that were previously marked and all the exhibits you will see tonight, we've compiled into an exhibit packet, which I handed out prior to the beginning of the meeting. There's an updated witness and exhibit list on the first page of every package, which essentially serves as a table of contents. And that list identifies the applicant, the property, the nature of the application, the witnesses, the previously marked exhibits, and the new exhibits being marked this evening. When we refer to or introduce a new exhibit, we will try to direct you to the page number of the exhibit packet, where you can find it. The page numbers are located on the bottom right corner. A few additional notes before we get started relative to any necessary ancillary relief needed for the project. First, at the last hearing, the board indicated its preference to grant a waiver from the requirement to place 2 landscape islands in the existing parking field in front of buildings A and B in lieu of eliminating parking spaces in that area to add the islands. And second, there was somewhat of an interpretation disagreement as to whether the proposed location of the clubhouse required a bulk variance to permit it to be located in the front yard. I spoke with the town's attorney, Mr. Malinsky, and he indicated to me that he negotiated the ordinance that governs the property on behalf of the town, and that the ordinance was written to permit that clubhouse in that location without the need for a variance. As I previously mentioned, the site is an inclusionary project, meaning it includes affordable housing as well as market rate units. And this site was selected by the town council as a compliance mechanism to satisfy a portion of its affordable housing obligation. And the ordinance was specifically negotiated between the town and the applicant to provide exactly the plan that was presented to you at the last meeting, including the location of the clubhouse. So Mr. Malinsky assured me no variance should be required for the clubhouse location. I did speak with Mr. McGrarty about that conversation, and I just want to put that out there on the record for further discussion later. With those housekeeping items out of the way, I'll note the prior meeting I detailed a procedural history of the application submission and how we got to the meeting. Unless you would like me to go through that again, it's already on the prior record. We're now prepared to move forward with our supplemental presentation. And I have 3 witnesses that I would like to have sworn before we start providing any testimony.
Did Mr. Malinsky give you any documentation for what he said?
I'm sorry?
Did Mr. Malinsky give you any documentation for
No,
your
but I believe
conversation?
him and Mr. McGrarty spoke about it as well.
I spoke to Mr. Malinsky. He confirmed that he had that conversation.
Okay.
I would not misrepresent that conversation, Mr. Faribault.
Oh, well, you may not misrepresent it, but sometimes people don't quite understand what everybody else is saying
I
sometimes.
verified.
Okay.
So if we can have our witnesses sworn this evening, I have Mr. Thomas Resch, the civil engineer, Mr. Colchins, our architect, and Dr. Ira Trocchi, who's the managing member of Hammonton Gardens LLC. You would just please stand. Dr. Trocchi, you were not here at the last meeting. It's very important that everybody speak directly into the microphone to be captured for the record and for the public that's watching on TV.
You swear the testimony you're about to give.
Raise your right hand, please.
You swear the testimony you're about to give will be the truth and nothing but the truth, so help you God.
Yes, I do. Very well. Proceed.
Before we start with any engineering or architectural testimony, Dr. Trocchi would like to address the board regarding the application.
Can you please provide his address as well?
It's the same as the applicant.
Good evening, everybody. I just want to let you know what a pleasure it is to be back in Hammonton. Many, many years ago, I built those apartments. In 1962, I was 12 years old. I was working with the bricklayers. We were doing 1,000 bricks a day. Those buildings were built incredibly. And after the building was built, and I worked there, I then also ended up cleaning all the apartments. And trust me, before we rented them out, I did a beautiful job cleaning them. And I spent many times in Hammonton. In fact, I used to live on a chicken farm in Mays Landing. So we used to do our shopping in Hammonton here. We went to the local doctors here. I went to the eye doctors here. And then later on, when I went away from school, came back from college and everything, I practiced at Kessler Hospital up until the day that it was no longer Kessler Hospital. So I have a great relationship. I've always loved Hammonton. I mean, it's just a few miles from where my home was on my chicken farm. And we used to look at this town like the big city. Mays Landing was the little town, Egg Harbor was the little town, Hammonton was the big city. Because we rarely ever went to Atlantic City. So it's a pleasure to be here. And I remember when my father, my uncle built the apartments, with my help, of course, as a little kid. At that time, we were planning to build more apartments. So it's nice to see that it only took 60 years, and we're going to hopefully building these beautiful new apartments. And I want to thank you all for listening.
Thank you. Thank you.
Thank you, Dr. Trocchi. Our next witness is Mr. Resch. Mr. Resch, please step forward. Mr. Resch was previously qualified by the board on June 15th as an expert in the field of engineering. Mr. Resch, have any of your qualifications changed since June 15th?
No, they have not.
And is your license still in good standing?
Yes, it is.
I would ask that the board continue to accept Mr. Resch as an expert in the field of engineering.
Very well.
Thank-
Accepted, yeah.
Thank you. All right, Mr. Resch, just for the benefit of the board members that weren't here at the last meeting and may not have been able to see the exhibits when they were watching the tape or listening to the audio, could you please just reorient the board with the site location and the current conditions?
Certainly. Quick run through Exhibit A1 as aerial plan. You see the location of Block 1201, lots 5.01. About 12.7 acres, 430 feet or so of frontage on 12th Street, also known as Route 54, 1,300 feet depth back to Commerce Way. There's 5 existing residential apartments on the property with a total of 52 units. Each of them are 2-bedroom units. There's also an existing single-family dwelling up at the front that has an apartment. There's 2 access points from Route 54 near each of the corner property lines. And the back area, as you can see, is currently undeveloped all the way back to Commerce Way.
Thank you. That exhibit, by the way, was marked A1 at the last meeting. It's the first numbered sheet in the packet that we handed to you this evening.
What number again?
That was the first sheet in your package after the top sheet. So we didn't number the top sheet. We figured that might be too confusing. It's more of a table of contents. All right. So, all right, Tom, can you now give a quick refresher to the board, an overall review of the proposed development?
Certainly. I have Exhibit A2, which is titled Site Plan Exhibit, colored rendering of the site plan that was part of the original set.
Excuse me, that's sheet 2 in the packet that we handed to you this evening.
The plan is to have rehabilitation of the 5 existing buildings and construction of 4 new buildings that will have a total of 84 new units with a mixture of different bedrooms. That will include 13 affordable housing units. There will also be removing that existing dwelling I pointed out earlier in the front, and it will be replaced by a 2,800 square foot clubhouse.
Could I interrupt for 1 second? We need to get in my microphone a little bit closer.
Yeah, can we see if maybe this one's working? We had a little bit of problem with it the last time. All right, it's a green light. Does that work? Can you hear it?
Can you speak into it?
Sure. Can you hear me? Can you hear me now? The proverbial, can you hear me now?
Yes.
Okay, great.
Thank you. After the clubhouse, we're going to be extending the roadway here and making a loop system with new asphalt paving, and then an access way out the back to Commerce Drive.
All right, so since the last meeting, Tom, did we make some revisions to the plan? Do we have an exhibit to show the revisions that the applicant's willing and able to make?
Yes.
All right, and that exhibit is identified as what?
It's called, excuse me, Exhibit Plan Revisions.
Oops. Yep, you know what, before we go there, I just want to back up for a second. A copy of the IDZ ordinance with the exhibits that it refers to, we've actually marked as A9, and that starts at page 9 of your packet. I just want to get that on the record. Mr. McGarty, I'd like to introduce that. A copy of that ordinance is A9.
Sure, that's fine.
All right, and then the plan that Mr. Resch is referring to is actually A10 on our exhibit list, and it starts at, it's sheet 14 in your packets. Got it, thank you.
So the plan that I have in front of me that you also have, A10, Exhibit Plan Revisions, shows in like a red or orange color items that we will be making changes to as a result of the last planning board, the last land use board hearing, as well as some comments we received from other entities within the town of Hammonton. We're adding 2 new walking paths, as you see in orange here. First one will start out by Route 54, proceed to the left of Building B, and go along the existing drive lanes behind Buildings D and E, and end at the top lot. The second pedestrian path will start near Building 4 and go down to Commerce Way. And they are proposed as gravel pedestrian paths. Next, we are going to add an additional pole light along the roadway that goes from the parking area back to Commerce Way. That was requested. Trash enclosures. I had good feedback from Mr. Rivera from the Public Works Department. He asked for an additional trash enclosure, which I will point out to the east of basin number 2, and also he indicated that due to the how the trash dumpsters are, they don't have wheels. We need to have them all at 45-degree angles so that their trucks can pull straight in and lift them in.
Are they noted on the plan?
Yes.
How many do you have? How many?
There's 4. We had 3 shown. Now we're showing 4.
Whereabouts are they showing?
There is one near Building C. That's
Right.
what we had before, but it's
Right.
on an angle. The new one is, as I just pointed
Okay, I
out,
see
to
it there,
the east
okay.
of basin number 2. There's one that we could drive straight into at the end of the parking near building number 4. And then in between existing buildings D and E. And we also made them wider. We had them 20 feet wide previously, but Mr. Rivera looked at the space that would really be needed, so now they're going to be 24 feet wide. So that is shown on.
Now, how about a turnaround point for the trash trucks?
They will turn, go straight in and then back right out. And that's what was recommended by Mr. Rivera. And we had, in order to accommodate the one in between building D and E on the angle, we're going to have to remove 2 parking spaces, but we're going to make that up near building 4, add them at the end, and scoot the trash enclosure down a little bit further. We still have more than 20 feet setback. I believe we're at 24 feet from the property line, so we're okay in that respect.
And Tom, in that location, the board had previously expressed a concern about the opening doors
Yes.
for the trash enclosure in that location not impeding any parking.
Yes, and
So,
that will stay, and that will not interfere with any of the parking spaces. The doors will not reach the parking spaces. Next, with the top lot, we asked, I believe, a bicycle rack was requested. We showed a bicycle rack, and we also showed like the general outline of the tot lot itself. And
yes, yeah. So if you flip to, do you have it? Oh, okay. So in your packet, and I'll hold it up for everybody on TV to see. In the packet as Exhibit A12 on sheet 16, there's an image of the tot lot equipment for the tot lot. And I don't know, I can turn around to TV.
It's roughly about 25 feet wide by 12 feet deep, or vice versa. And that's shown, the perimeter of that is shown within the top lot. It has swings, a slide, some other climbing ladders and climbing equipment. So that is the roughly what the playground equipment will look like at the top lot.
And Tom, I think you mentioned it, but you added bicycle racks at the tot lot too,
Yes.
as well, as requested? Okay.
Also shown on here is a proposed bus shelter up at the front in between existing buildings A and B. This location, was picked as a result of conversation and emails I had with Tony Mazza of the Hammonton Transportation Department. I explained what we were doing, I provided her the plan, and presently this is the general area where they get picked up by the mailboxes. And after explaining the new development, she wanted to keep keep one bus shelter at that location. No need for any secondary. They would not be going out the back of Commerce Way. So as a result of that, we're going to propose a new bus shelter in the general area where they presently get picked up at the front of the property.
And Tom, did you confirm that conversation with Ms. Mazza in writing?
Yes, I did.
And that is shown as Exhibit A13 in your packet on sheet 17. In that letter, I'll just paraphrase for purposes of those listening. Tom confirmed his conversation with Ms. Mazza in that regard and asked her to reach out to him should she disagree or have any disagreement with what he stated as reflecting their conversation. Have you heard from Ms. Mazza since then?
She just confirmed, that it was acceptable.
Okay. Thank you.
Also, the fire department got back and they had, the main thing was they wanted to show the turning radiuses of their fire apparatus. They gave us the turning templates, and we had provided one previously with a very similar truck, but now we show the turning radiuses of the fire apparatus that Hammonton Fire Department utilizes. And they also requested to show the fire hydrants on the site, which we already had it shown, but we're also in discussions with the water department. We're going to be adding probably at least one more fire hydrant, but we'll be taking care of that in the near future.
In coordination with the request of the sewer and water department?
Yes.
Okay, and that truck turning template that you placed on there, does the fire apparatus circulate adequately, safely, and efficiently around the site?
Yes, it does. I believe that is...
I want to circle back to one thing, going back to the trash enclosures. We are still proposing adequate landscaping and buffering around those trash enclosures to
Yes, we
screen
are.
them from view?
Yes.
Okay. And I think there's one other red area on the plan that we didn't discuss around the new trash enclosure. Can you explain what that line represents?
Certainly. At the new trash enclosure that was requested, in that area we had a stone riprap channel that was taking stormwater from the roadways and into the basin. I just had to reroute it around the new trash enclosure into the basin because it would have gone right through it. So that's the only other red item you'll see on this plan.
All right, I think, does that cover all of the plan revisions themselves as shown on A10?
Yes, it does.
Great. So with respect to other comments we received from the board?
If I may, I'm sorry.
Sure.
I get the sense you're going to go off of A10. Can I just ask one question before you?
Sure.
Tom, I'm trying to, the size of the drawing that we have is really beautiful. I'm seeing a piece of some red behind the clubhouse, roughly there. Can you tell me what that is?
That's the bus shelter.
Oh, got it. Okay, thank you.
One question also before we jump off A10. There's 4 new proposed trash enclosures.
Correct.
Is the one that currently exists right around the bend remaining?
Yes, it is.
Will that also be provided the same shrubbery and screening as the others?
At the present time, it's not proposed like that.
Okay.
So at the present time, it is not.
Okay.
It was proposed to remain in its current condition.
Okay.
Can you point to that, I'm sorry, can you point to that just again? Okay, thank you.
Okay.
Just a question while we're on that page. The gravel walkway,
Yes.
what are you proposing? What
Where?
is your proposal?
It-
The
where-
gravel walkways,
It's
No.
orange.
the
Material?
material, is it stabilized, you gonna stabilize the base? What are you gonna, I mean,
Yeah, we're planning on like probably 6-inch dense graded aggregate, 6-inch thick dense graded aggregate, about, I think I have it, probably shows 4 feet wide.
That will be able to accommodate pedestrian and bicycle activity if
Yes.
desired?
And that's in lieu of sidewalks in front of buildings connecting buildings 1, 2, and 3, and then out through Commerce Way.
Yes.
So there is a path out to Commerce Way. There's 2 paths provided on the plan, one leading from the top lot all the way around to 54, and the second one here at Building 4 leading out to Commerce Way.
Right, gravel
Yeah,
though,
but gravel,
not
correct.
sidewalk.
So are you saying the gravel is going to be a bike path too?
Yes. It will serve a pedestrian purpose. It's whatever access the residents want to use it for.
The kind of gravel you're putting down there, can a bike actually ride on it? I mean, most of the gravel that I see is like just stones. Is that what you're talking about, or are you talking about something different?
Yeah, it's, right now it's proposed as a similar base that would be underneath an asphalt. It's called dense graded aggregate. You know, we could go with something similar to that, but it packs really well, and it'd be, you know, a good surface for people to walk on and ride on.
So your Exhibit B, where it shows sidewalks that appear to be concrete in front of the structures, that's not correct?
So that's not our exhibit, and I'll get to that in a minute. That's the exhibit that was attached to the ordinance, and we're going to discuss that, but we're not there yet. But that's correct, we're not, that exhibit attached to the ordinance was designed to provide the style and view of architecture the new proposed buildings are supposed to look like. That wasn't provided to account for sidewalk. The sidewalk was, and the purpose of that exhibit for the ordinance was the architecture itself.
Tom, who developed that?
That was developed by the applicant when negotiating the ordinance with the town.
That's
The ordinance speaks directly to sidewalks. Sidewalks are required in specific locations, and the ordinance specifically says that any other ordinance requirement that's not consistent with this ordinance is superseded.
there seems to be, between the idea and the reality lies the shadow. And there seems to be a little bit of a shadow here between what was discussed and what got trans. And I understand it was a very difficult process, taking ideas and verbalizing them and putting them down into writing. But there were certain things, and I'll get into that later, that the mayor maintains were discussed and agreed to during the course of these conceptual discussions and the settlement negotiations that may not be captured in detail in the writing of the settlement agreement in the ordinance, but were discussed and agreed to by the applicant. We'll get into that later.
Well, with all due respect to the mayor, who's not here this evening to speak for himself, and that process, the ordinance speaks for itself. It's a document, that's what's enforceable, and this board's job is to look at the ordinance and make sure the plan complies with the ordinance as written. Any discussions that may have been had that weren't memorialized in that ordinance are not enforceable. We have an ordinance, the 4 corners of that document is what we're living in. And we've presented a by right application that's entirely consistent with the ordinance.
so then, in the ordinance, number 11D, sidewalks shall be provided to reasonably connect the residential units to the parking areas and shall be consistent with the conceptual plan, concept plan. The concept plan that was given and memorialized with the ordinance shows sidewalks
No,
in front of the buildings.
No, the concept plan, if you
Well,
turn to.
I'm only using readers, but my eyeglasses are showing me something
There's a
different,
separate
so-
exhibit. The exhibit to the ordinance that attached the concept plan was Exhibit A. And it's in small print on sheet 12, and it's in large print, let me get you the right sheet, on sheet 15. All right, so, or sheet 18, which I pre-marked as A15.
Well, you guys got me totally confused
So
here.
if you look at sheet 18 of the packet, please, bottom right corner, sheet 18. That is a blow-up of the concept plan that's attached to the ordinance,
And
Right.
it's attached to the ordinance as Exhibit A.
as Exhibit A, all right? That shows sidewalks from the buildings to the parking field. That's the only place that this shows the sidewalk.
I know, I was just confused because you originally, maybe I'm wrong, you originally said that the exhibit on page 4 was what you showed to, I wasn't there. I'm just kind of like reverberating what you said. And maybe I might be wrong.
Yeah, I
That
don't
you
think,
showed them page 4, and then you said you showed them page,
it wasn't 4, we haven't discussed 4 tonight.
no, that when he was talking about, when he was talking about what you showed city council, he was referring to, I'm guessing, page 4. Am I?
Now, so
Exhibit B, A18, I believe is what Mr.
A18 is what,
He's referring
is a
to.
blow-up of what Mr. Willerman was showing
And
us
that's right.
when he was referring to
Okay.
the architecture that was presented, that was part of the concept plan,
So
that was part of the settlement.
Is page 4, Exhibit A4, your plan? That
Page,
shows sidewalks in front of the
Page
buildings.
4 of the sheet of the packet, see, I provided this packet because you asked for it,
Mm-hmm.
but this is why it's confusing and why I don't like to do this. Sheet 4 is A04, which was the concept renderings, or not the concept, the renderings that we presented at the last meeting. We haven't gotten back to the architectural renderings yet. And as it was testified to at the last meeting, the purpose of the renderings were to show the proposed architecture and styling of the building. The sidewalks are in the rendering because that's just a design, it's a rendering. But it's, the purpose of the rendering was the architecture of the building, not the sidewalks. And we made it very clear at the last meeting, sidewalks were provided where they're required to be provided by the ordinance.
The ordinance, I think there's a misinterpretation of the ordinance, because the ordinance says reasonably. Who's going to decide what reasonably means? 'Cause I
You
think
go-
reasonably is one thing, and you might think it's not, no sidewalks.
If I
I
may-
find it a little hard to build 136 units without any sidewalks for pedestrians. Just me,
So,
I'm one person.
Before you,
If I may, I think you have to read the text of the ordinance along with the graphics that were attached. Okay, and the graphics sort of describe what the text may not as artfully have said. And like it or not, it's pretty clear on the Exhibit A to the ordinance, and that's what
we have that marked as A15 and sheet 18.
is that the sidewalks are shown to describe what the text was intended to reflect.
So can I restate that another way? When the ordinance was adopted, if you look at exhibit, what I've marked as A9, it starts at sheet 9, okay? If you go to that, that's the entirety, we put the entirety of the ordinance in this package with its exhibits. So A9 contains 1, 2, 3 sheets of text, and then the fourth sheet shows you exhibits A and B attached to the ordinance, and the next sheet shows you Exhibit C attached to the ordinance. What we're referring to right now in this conversation is Exhibit A to the ordinance. And to make it easier for you to read it, we blew that up and attached it as a separate exhibit, its own exhibit, as A15 on sheet 18. All right, so sheet 18 represents the concept plan that was attached to the ordinance, which reflects the culmination of the negotiations between the applicant and the town as to what the redevelopment of this site would look like with affordable housing, with new apartments and affordable housing units. And if you look at Exhibit A15, sheet 18, you will see that the only sidewalks shown on the buildings extend from the buildings to the parking area. And that is consistent with the ordinance. And that is consistent with what was provided on the plans that we've supplied to you. So in response to your request to provide sidewalks, which is an unnecessarily cost-generative feature that cannot be imposed on the applicant in the affordable housing context, absent an agreement, which we'd never agreed to, we provided walking paths to meet the purpose and intent of your desire to provide pedestrian connectivity from the buildings to the front and from the buildings to, down to Commerce Way.
So, now I'm totally lost here. You're gonna pull in a car, and you're gonna have a curbing when you go park in front of the units, correct?
There is no curbing along the southerly portion of the buildings. There is curbing on the northerly portion of the buildings.
So that you pull in front of your apartment, or you pull up there, you're just gonna pull up to the grass and then walk in over the grass? Or?
Yeah.
Grass, or you're probably going to walk around on the asphalt and go up.
Well, all right, here's my, okay, let's say this is the door here. I park over here, this is the door. To get from this car to my front door, what's gonna be there? What's between the car and the door?
There's a sidewalk that goes up to the building.
There's
To
one
get that
side.
sidewalk, you're gonna have to walk behind the cars and then go to the, if you don't wanna walk on grass or something, you're gonna walk behind the cars
Yeah.
and then go between cars and up to the doors.
Yes.
Which is
Yes.
similar
I
to
understand.
the
I
other
was
buildings right now.
a little confused, but makes a little more sense.
So that would include all pedestrian traffic, including children going to the place where the school bus would pick them up.
That's correct.
So they would be walking in the paved area of the parking lot behind the parked cars.
No, that's why we're providing the walking path. They can jump on the walking path anywhere and walk it right out to the, out to the pavilion, the gazebo area in the front, which connects you right to the bus stop.
So what you're saying is they have to go to the back of their house and then walk around the back of
That-
everybody else's houses?
That's an option, yes. They
No,
can
that's
walk-
the only, it's
No,
either
they-
it's either that, walk in the, it's either that, walk in the street or walk on the grass.
Well, currently, buildings D, E, and is that C? Currently walk in the grass and the roadway. So what is the intent of the ordinance is to make sure that the new design is consistent with the existing design. The existing buildings, D, C, and E, have the same configuration, and it provides, that's where they're walking right now. So the new buildings are consistent with that, but in addition to that, now we're providing a walking path as you request, a path that you've requested.
Well, you know, and I know nobody's going to use that path, basically.
I don't know that for sure, Mr. Faribault, and neither can you.
Are you gonna have
Let
a
me-
back door to go out to the path?
Could I jump in here for a moment, just to sort of rein everybody in? There's an ordinance that has language in it. We may not like it, you may not like it now, but it is the ordinance that this board is bound by and the city's bound by. And the language is pretty clear. Sidewalk shall be provided to reasonably connect the residential units to the parking area and shall be consistent with the concept plan. The concept plan is attached, and it is what it is. I don't want the board to go down the wrong path on this because you're not allowed to just renegotiate this agreement. And then there's this particular statute. So all the points are being made well, but I felt necessary to caution you that we're not renegotiating the ordinance, which was done in conjunction with the applicant, which is part of the fair housing settlement. So
Mr. McGrory, did the settlement agreement and the ordinance that followed, did that designate in detail the location, not of the sidewalk, but of the walking paths?
actually, the walking paths were added by the applicant at the request of the board, or their interpretation of the board. They weren't on the plans at all.
So
And they're not required to be.
Is there any discretion with the walking passes in terms of their location? I mean, they don't have to be made of concrete, they don't have to be quote-unquote sidewalks per se, but in consideration of some of the aspects of public safety, can't we have a little input in terms of where those walking paths would be located so that we have safe?
You could have input, and certainly the applicant could take that into consideration, but understand we start from a position where the applicant is not required to put the paths in at all, as this current statute is written, the current ordinance. So I just caution you that it's not a you do it our way or not.
With it saying reasonably connect, I mean, I don't think it's being unreasonable, and I do appreciate the fact that they are putting the walkways, in in the DGA. DGA, for the people of the board who never worked in construction, it's crushed asphalt. So after, my problem with the DGA is after 6 months or after a year, we all know what it's going to look like.
20 bike rides.
So that's the problem with the so it's not gravel. It's better that it's DGA than gravel, as was mentioned. But dense grade aggregate is a better material. But I don't know, barring the expense of paving it, and I don't know the difference with the cost of running a small paver through there for the walkways. I myself, as a board member, would be happier if they were paved. I appreciate this because it does give some walkability inside the project. And I appreciate you for adding that to that. But, I'm just concerned with, our concern, my concern is down the road maintenance with, what's it going to look like 5 years from now? Because we have no legal standing at that point. We're here now. We could dictate to you some things that aren't in the agreement now. Because I still feel that it says reasonably connect, and I don't think as a board member it's being unreasonable to ask you to make the property pedestrian friendly.
And pedestrian safe, especially for school-age children, which I see, if they're going to be walking to collect at the bus stop, they are probably going to take the most direct path, and that's going to be in the parking lot, and that's going to provide conflicts between cars backing up and kids walking on a hard spot where they don't get wet.
Okay, guys, when we built this with the approval of the city back in the 60s when we built the property. Since then, the property has been there over 60 years. There has not been one accident of one child ever run over by a car or by a bicycle on this property for 60 years. And I know because I would be sued if someone would have been run over by a car or a bicycle. There hasn't been one in 60 years. And let me finish also. The agreement that was made with the city, and by the way, that agreement started years before when the city came to me and asked a favor of me. Could I give them access to the Commerce Way from my property because they needed to take the dirt to use it, and I allow them? I said yes, but in the future we want to do some sewer, and I put sewer in. It cost me a lot of money, but I did it. So what I'm trying to say is this. Right now, the people are walking, and with this beautiful path we're putting in, it's much, much better than what we have now in the existing. And it's more practical. And for me to spend an extra $200,000 on concrete, I can't afford to build the apartments. I'm sure all of you are in the business and understand that the cost today is 30 to 40% higher than when it was when I originally went for this plan, I think 3 years ago. So it's going to cost me 40% more to build it. And the truth is, with apartments or building today, it's hard to make the money from the rent because people can't pay $2,000 a month. So, we have to keep the cost reasonable. And then on top of it, we also have affordable housing here. It's not even full market rate. We have some affordable housing to meet Hammonton's requirement for affordable housing. So when we negotiated this, we negotiated with the understanding that we're going to try to do it better than it was. And when you gentlemen came out and said, listen, what about a pathway? I spoke to my attorney. He said, sure. Let me find out the cost and look at it. And the gravel pathway, and by the way, I have a gravel pathway in my other properties, and they've worked great. And again, we've had gravel pathways for 40 and 50 years, and we maintain them. So when you say that you don't have any jurisdiction, obviously, as an owner, I have to keep my property in good condition. So if there's a problem with the parking lot, we fix it. If there's a problem with the pathway with the gravel, we fix it, just like anything else. So I don't see it as a major issue. And the truth is, the pathway going to Commerce Way, I doubt anyone's going to use it. They're going to be using the pathway to the main road the way they did it. And I think if you look at it, it's very conducive. And again, we've been doing it for 60 years the way it is now. And now we're going to improve it even. So I don't think it's going to be an issue that you're concerned about, because I'm concerned about it too. I'm the owner. I don't want to be sued. I don't want children hurt. I don't want anybody hurt. But it's been this way for 60-some years. We haven't had a problem. And again, I doubt we're going to have a problem in the future. And with this added pathway, I think it's going to be even safer than it is, with the new addition. And also, with the new apartments, it's going to be an improvement because we're improving the old apartments also to have a much better look and also to be a nicer property all along. So we're improving the old, not just the new. And when we negotiated it, I offered that. I wasn't told you have to do it. I offered, listen, I'm going to fix up the old apartments and make them look prettier. Why not? And they thought it was great, and I said, fine. So, I'm not against, like, when the idea of a pathway, I told my lawyer, oh, fine, let's do it. I looked at the cost, trust me, of sidewalks and asphalt. It's just astronomical dollars, specifically today. And trust me, if I could use a little paver and do it for 10 grand, I would do it. I wouldn't think twice. But then the numbers are astronomical today. And we will maintain that quote-unquote gravel pathway to make sure that it's safe. Any questions for me about that? Yes, sir.
Dr. Trocchi.
Yes.
Apart from the gravel pathway and its location, you made mention that you were going to fix up the existing apartments.
Correct.
And it was the understanding of the town that there would be a seamless look between the old and the new.
Well, again, sir, all due respect. I've been building for 60 years, okay? There's no way to take a building that's 60-some years old and make it look like this brand-new building I'm putting up. So what we did is, we did a compromise of making it look nice, but not crazy. I can't take the old buildings, tear them down, and build new. It was to do the work that we showed, and that was approved by the city. And that's what is on the plan, what we're doing. So it's going to be as approved by the city. Now, guys, let's be realistic. This was the decision made by City Council with recommendations of everybody involved, the engineer, the lawyers, and everybody else. And it was a way to help the city with their affordable housing issue. So, and we worked together on it to make it a compromise which is good for the city, as opposed to tearing my old buildings down and building brand new. Because that would just be crazy, dollar-wise.
Here again, we have the difference between the idea and the reality and the shadow. Because we're not asking you to tear down the buildings and build them up new. But we are, under the impression you're going to replace the windows, you're going to replace the gutters, you're going to put on new roofs. All these things were discussed and agreed to, at least conceptually, notwithstanding what the language of the ordinance says, which addresses that, but not as specifically as what was discussed in the...
All right, but Mr. Willerman, we haven't gotten back to the architectural testimony tonight.
Okay.
All right, there are exhibits attached to the ordinance that reflect, and there's language in the ordinance. The language in the ordinance indicates that the revisions to the existing building should be substantially consistent with the exhibit that's attached to the ordinance, and the language with respect to the new buildings says that the new building should be similar in appearance and style as to the exhibit attached to the ordinance. But we are going to get back to the architecture. We haven't gotten there yet.
And we're going to discuss the improvements made to those existing buildings.
We already went through all that testimony last time, what's being improved.
Yeah, well, I remember we did go through that, but if I remember, there was an issue about the duration of when all of this was going to happen.
And we have an answer for that, too. We haven't
Okay.
gotten there yet. That was
Okay.
part of the next part of Mr. Resch's testimony.
Okay.
So if we would be permitted to allow to continue, maybe we can answer some of your questions through the rest of the testimony, and then we can come back to any questions you might still have. All right. All right. No problem. All right, so Mr. Resch, with respect to various additional items that were discussed with the board at the last meeting and comments made by the board, one of the questions or requests was, especially coming from the Environmental Commission and the board, was whether the stormwater management design could be reviewed again, and whether any changes could be made to address the Pinelands inconsistency determination, certificate of inconsistency regarding the basin in the back. Did you have any conversations with Mr. Herman about that?
Yes, I discussed it with Mr. Herman, and at that time, we noted what is proposed, and Now, I'm not going to speak for Mr. Herman, but he can too, but we both agreed that we're doing the best we possibly can with capturing as much water as we possibly can with what we're doing now. And in Mr. Herman's review letter, he noted that also, that it was acceptable, the design we had. But like I said, I'll leave that to him to comment any further.
And with respect to construction phasing, the board had asked to have some sort of better idea as to how the renovations, the new buildings, and the clubhouse construction would be completed in conjunction with each other. Did you prepare an exhibit for that?
Yes, I did.
All right, and that is marked as A14. It's sheet 17 in your packet. All right, so do you have a copy of that in front of you, or do you?
Yeah.
Okay.
Next time.
All right, would you please just review that with the board?
Yeah, I've listed it as like an 8-step process. First step would be constructing the rear loop asphalt drive, as well as the drive going out to Commerce Way, putting in any other infrastructure like all the stormwater improvements, water mains, trash enclosures, and things like that. And I noted that during or after that site work construction, construct buildings number 1 and 2, the ones in the middle closest to the front, and also the new parking spaces adjoining to them that either be put in at the time of when, towards the end of when the buildings are constructed, or possibly when the drive lanes are constructed. It'd be up really to the contractor, what he thinks is the best process. Firstly, I would think that those adjoining parking spaces would be put in towards the end of the building construction so that there's no damage done to them with all the heavy work that would be going on. After that, step 2 would be rehabilitation of one of the existing buildings prior to the second new building receiving a CO. Because in the ordinance, I believe it states that before a second new building gets a CO, that one of the existing buildings needs to have its rehabilitation occur. And then, after that, we would plan to construct the clubhouse, the new front parking spaces, and any of the site work like the drainage improvements in that area, as well as the connecting sidewalk. So that would be step 3.
Just for clarification purposes, because there's been so much discussion about sidewalk, you said connect the sidewalk. Could you please clarify what you mean by that?
Yeah, the concrete sidewalk and gazebo that goes from the front of the property where the new bus shelter is to the connected to the asphalt drive, the existing asphalt drive in the middle of the site. So that would be step 3. After that, I would expect, landscaping around any of the new improvements to occur. And then step 5 would be the construction of building number 3, which is the last one that is inside of the loop area, as well as the top lot and any of the parking spaces joining building 3, as well as right in front of the top lot. And then at that point, there would be rehabilitation of 2 more existing buildings, but that would have to be completed prior to the 3rd new building constructed in accordance with the ordinance.
Prior to the issuance of the CO for the 3rd new building?
Yes, correct.
Okay.
Following that, I would expect the last new building, number 4, as well as the parking spaces to be constructed, and then completion of landscaping in all areas. And then prior to that 4th new building getting its CO, the last 2 existing buildings would have their rehabilitation completed.
Excuse me, could you define rehab?
So we went through this at the last meeting,
Right,
right?
and I'm still confused.
Okay, so,
Sorry, I don't want to cut you off, but should we cover that with the architect
yes.
at that point? I think it might be better for us to cover that with the architect, since it is largely exterior.
Thank you. I would like to get through the balance of the testimony to the extent that all these major ancillary issues aren't addressed. We can come back to them, but I think the testimony is going to answer some questions. All right, so with respect to the estimated construction phasing, Exhibit A14 shows you the interaction of the renovation of the existing buildings, construction of the new buildings, and the clubhouse. All right, back to questions for Mr. Resch. The additional municipal department comments, you indicated you received the fire official comment. You went through what we're doing to address those. You're going to meet with water and sewer regarding the design and location of the new water service infrastructure and to provide that second hydrant.
Yes.
Okay. And we also received comments from the construction department, the public works, which you've already addressed on the record.
Yes.
We did get a copy of the Environmental Commission report. We've addressed all those comments in previous testimony. The one comment that we hadn't addressed was revisions to stormwater management, which was just addressed. And we were indicated by the board secretary, the police department had no comment. And I think that covers everything. That covers everything that we received
Yes.
since the last meeting. Okay. And then I just want to go back to, if we could turn back to A15, which is sheet 18 in the packet. Do you have a board showing that? Okay. All right. So this is, for the record, the concept plan that's attached to the ordinance is Exhibit A. Is that correct, Tom?
That is correct.
Okay. So in your professional engineering opinion, does the plan proposed and presented to the board originally and/or with the revisions that we've shown tonight, is it consistent with the concept plan?
Yes, it is.
Okay. And are the revisions that we made as a result of the board's comments, do they go above and beyond what's shown on the concept plan?
Yes, they do.
Okay. But as revised, the plan remains substantially consistent with the concept plan, correct?
Yes, that is correct.
Okay. Okay. That's all I have for Mr. Resch at the moment. I'd like to move on to the testimony of our architect, Mr. Colchins. Thanks, Tom.
Will Mr. Resch be available for questions after
Yes.
entirety? Thank you.
Shelley, I'm not sure, it's a red light now, so I'm not sure they're picking up
Yeah, if you could just use that, like if that one's,
this one.
if that one's dead, yeah, just if the witness could
Yeah.
also speak into there. 'Cause
Yeah, it's,
if not, then no one
Yeah.
will be able to hear what he's saying.
we're going to try, but in order for him to be able to go through and, for me to speak, we're going to do our best here. Okay. All right, could you step over here?
Sure.
Thank you. All right, Mr. Colchins, please state your name and address for the record.
Michael Colchins, 6021 3rd Street, Baseline, New Jersey.
Mr. Colchins, you were here at the last June 15th meeting for this application, correct?
Yes.
And you're the architect of record?
I am.
And you were qualified as an expert in the field of architecture at that meeting. Have any of your credentials changed?
No, they have.
And is your license still in good standing in New Jersey?
It is.
Mr. Marinelli, Chairman Marinelli, we'd like to submit and have Mr. Colchins continue to be qualified as an expert in the field of architecture. Thank you.
No, accept your qualifications. Please.
Thank you. All right, so at the last meeting, Mr. Colchins, we had some confusing testimony, is what I'll call it, regarding what was being proposed by way of renovation to the existing buildings. So I believe do we have a new rendering tonight that provides some clarification?
Yes, we have a rendering of the proposed facade renovation.
Okay, and I'm going to mark them, I have to do it this way so I can mark his one exhibit, and then I'll tell you where to find them. We also have a revised rendering of the clubhouse, is that correct?
Yes,
And are both of those shown on the board that you're showing to the board?
they are.
And what is that board identified as?
That's what's that.
And it's called rendering?
Yeah,
And the date of it is?
well,
You need to change the date. Mr. McGarty, I have these two images separately marked in the exhibit package as A16 and A17 on sheets 19 and 20. Is that acceptable?
That's acceptable.
Okay, thank you.
Excuse me,
Great.
what pages are they designated?
Sheet 19
and 20.
is the first sheet that we're going to talk about.
No, that's the new.
And then we'll talk about sheet 20, and then we'll talk about sheet 21. Okay?
I guess.
Okay, thank you, Mr. Fulgens. Okay, so could you please indicate what this rendering we marked as A16 on sheet 19 demonstrates to the board?
Okay, so this is facade renovations.
You got to speak into the mic, sorry.
This is the old building.
So the final rendering is the the proposed facade renovations to the existing building. They are consistent with the same elements that were proposed on the
Ordinance?
the ordinance, yeah, the ordinance exhibit. So we're going to be reworking the existing roofs over the porches, replacing the aluminum columns with the more substantial built-up composite board columns. I'm proposing to add the front roofs, replacing the siding with board and batten, and generally just making the improving, updating the look of the entry roofs and support. Above those, we're adding new gable roofs that are facing the street. They will be proportionate with the bays and centered on the bays. There'll be board and batten siding in there, which will look nice. And in addition to those two elements, we'll be cleaning and repainting the doors, cleaning and repainting all the trim, and cleaning whatever work needs to be done on them. So those are the basic.
Cleaning and retaining all new trim. Is that what you said?
Repainting?
Or repaint?
Cleaning and repainting trim, not replacing them.
And where would that be located on that rendering, which we tend to clean and repaint?
The doors will be cleaned, the trim around the doors will be cleaned and repainted. There's a cornice underneath of the soffit that's nice to be cleaned and repainted.
It appears to me,
And
just
the aluminum railings will also be finished as well.
in any of those balconies where we have the facade opening up, where they've separated some of the trim on those balconies, are they going to be inspected to make sure that
Yeah, the balcony facings will be cleaned and repainted as well.
cleaned and repainted?
Basically, all the woodwork will be cleaned and repainted.
Will it be replaced if required or needed?
Yeah, if there's damaged material, we'll have to
So all
fix any
damaged
damaged material.
will be replaced, all damaged material?
Yes.
Yes, it will be replaced.
How old are those buildings? 60 years. Said they were
Dr. Trocchi indicated in his earlier statement to you that they were constructed around 1962.
1962. So those doors and windows are all of that time frame, all that era?
No, Dr. Trocchi can answer that.
Gentlemen, if any of you own apartments or own any buildings or your home, you know that some doors can last 40 years, some doors can last 2 years. It has to do with the maintenance and the care. Now, when this was built with the best products we could buy at that time. And that's why the building's still there and in great shape. And my tenants love the place, they love living there, and if there are problems, we repair them. Now, does some wood rot, have a problem? Sure, we replace it. And if there's any problems, I do it now, not just, for this. I do it now if there's a problem. If there's a problem with a door, it's no good, we replace it. I don't paint over rotten doors. I don't replace, nice material with garbage. I put nice material up, I paint it, because I want my tenant to live in a place that I would live in. And in fact, I lived in a very similar apartment to this in Ventnor for years when I first got married. So I lived in an apartment just like this, because our apartments are very similar, when I personally lived in Summerdale. So I've lived in these apartments, and trust me, I wouldn't have an apartment that I personally wouldn't live in. So yes, if there's a problem, we replace it. Can I tell you the age of each door? No, but if there's any bad doors, we replace it. I mean, just like at your home. I'm sure you don't have rotten doors in your house, and if you do, you replace it. But if you have a good door, just needs a little paint, you paint it. No different than your house, no different than what I do. So yes, we take care of our properties, or this property wouldn't be in such great condition after 60 years. And trust me, this property, this building, these older buildings are in better condition than many of the apartment buildings that are 4 and 5 years old in your community. Because this was built, I built it right. Thank you.
The only response I would have to that, Dr. Trocchi, is that age is what it is. You know, 60 years is a long time for anything to be opening and closed, including windows and doors.
But Mr. Willerman, there's been no testimony that all of these, any of these doors are original doors. That has not been the testimony. The testimony is by Dr. Trocchi that doors have been replaced as needed over the years. Doors will continue to be replaced as needed over the years. And during the renovation, if a door needs to be replaced, it will be replaced.
Sir,
I would like to
One
hear-
of, let me just make a comment. You made a comment about being 60-some years old doesn't open a door. Well, I'm over 60-some years old. I'm 72, and I'm working harder now than I ever did. I'm still doing surgery. I was picking weeds today, and I was moving furniture today, and I was involved in my restaurant cleaning up. So I'm 72, and trust me, I work harder than any of these 22-year-olds. So if that wood door, I don't even know how old it is, if that's 60 years old but in great shape, yeah, I'm going to paint it, keep it. If it's in rotten shape and it's 2 years old, I throw it away. So, sir, unless you have evidence, and there's no evidence here that there's anything problematic with my building, and in fact, we have a current CO from the city of Hammonton who inspected all the time. We have a current inspection from the state who inspect every single apartment, I think every 5 years. And we're fully in compliance, and we've had no valid complaints from the city of Hammonton, the health department, the building department, or anything. And if there is an issue, we always take care of it. And whether this complex or any other apartment I own. So I think what you're saying is, well, it's old, but just because it's old doesn't mean it's still good. I keep the furniture in my house that's 40-some years old, and it's much better than what they sell today. So I would put this apartment complex in a much better condition than some of your newer ones that you have out of here. This I can assure you. This is built bricks, blocks, and it was built the right way. Not like the new buildings of today, because I build the new buildings of today. No comparison. The old buildings are much better, much stronger. That's why they last.
Well, I would tend to agree with you that age is no indication of
Thank you.
functionality. But, there is a stipulation, and I'm just trying to understand exactly what the intent of that is in the settlement agreement and in the ordinance, that the new buildings and the old buildings will be substantially similar in appearance and in terms of their renovation and their
How about I have my attorney read it exactly what was approved? And that's exactly what we're going to do. And we're not looking to mind boggle anybody, but I'm a business guy and I'm a regular fella, who's looking at it as common sense. I'm not tearing down a 60-year-old building. There's not a chance. That's in great shape. I'm going to make it look nicer.
We're not going to ask you to do that.
Yeah, but basically when you're...
Have your attorney read the language.
The letter,
All right,
please.
so we read this into the record at the last meeting. Councilman Oliva, you want to say something first?
No, but I'm going to let you start, and then I'll
All right.
provide a comment afterwards.
Section H1 of the ordinance, which is now printed on sheet 11 of your packet, says, in conjunction with the new construction of the multifamily residential development contemplated under this ordinance provision, the 5 existing multifamily residential buildings shall be rehabilitated to conform as much as practicable in light of the requirement for the elimination of cost-generative features. The rehabilitation of the existing buildings shall be phased with the new construction. For purposes of this ordinance, rehabilitation shall mean cosmetic and architectural design features to the existing building's exterior that complement the new construction style. The 5 existing buildings after rehabilitation shall look substantially similar to the elevation attached hereto as Exhibit C. And Exhibit C is on sheet 13 of your packet. And then if I may go back, Section G16 of the ordinance, which is on page 10, sheet 10 of your packet, reads, under building design, the design of the new buildings and units shall be a similar, it says a similar, I'm just reading the error, a similar in appearance and style as the rendering attached as Exhibit B. And then Exhibit B is attached, it's on sheet 12, and we blew it up on sheet 21, I'm sorry. Packet's big, trying to finger through. So The testimony that we're putting on right now regards the rehabilitation of the existing units. We are going to get to testimony later regarding the the construction of the new buildings. We haven't gotten there yet, all right? But what we have to do, what the applicant is obligated to do, is provide a rendering that's substantially consistent with the exhibit to the ordinance. And what Mr. Colchin's just reviewed with you has the same gabled looks, the same entryway changes, and the same similar improvements to the balcony. The coloring on the rendering, they're never exact. Different printers show different colors, but the buildings will be the same color they are now. The roof's not changing. We had some question about that later, or at the last meeting. We're abandoning that gray-white infrastructure. Didn't have a copy of these exhibits prior to when I spoke with Mr. Malinsky a couple of weeks ago, because they weren't attached to the ordinance on your website. I had asked for them about a year ago, and nobody had them. I was unable to locate them anywhere. So Mr. Malinsky actually said, oh, I found them when I was talking to him, which is great. So in any event, the Exhibit C to the ordinance and Exhibit A16 are substantially similar. Don't worry about the difference in the colors. That's just printing. The brick is what the brick is now.
Have you done on the existing structures a walkthrough to evaluate what type of work will be needed to be done in order to bring that up to your
That will be
standard?
done on a building-by-building rehabilitation basis.
Yes, I have. I've walked through the buildings and I've seen it. And if you remember, what it says in the ordinance was cosmetic. Didn't say reconstructive. It didn't say to go inside the building and redo the inside. It didn't say to redo the plumbing, the electrical, and everything else. It says cosmetic, okay? And I went more than pure and simple than just saying, yeah, we'll paint a couple stripes on it. I said, no, we're going to make some gables. We're going to do this to make it look like the newer ones because I want them to be consistent. But no, we weren't going to completely rebuild it, take it all apart and rebuild it. And what it says was cosmetic. But I just want you to understand, if there's a problem with my apartments, I fix them, whatever it is, whatever the problem is. By the way, you're more than happy to go there anytime you want. Maybe you'll rent from me. You'll see the apartments are great. They're strong and they're well built, and there's not a problem. But we're talking about cosmetic. I'm a plastic and a cosmetic surgeon, so I know exactly what that means. Which means is I may make your tummy look nicer, but I'm not entering your stomach and taking your intestines out. So it's very similar to this. I'm making the outside look nicer. I'm not taking the entire structure and rebuilding it or taking out the inside. Okay?
I guess it gets down to what the term cosmetic means.
No, I'm telling you what cosmetic means. I'm in that business.
Cosmetic does not mean structural.
We know, that's correct, and we know what was intended by the ordinance by way of renovations to the existing building because there's a rendering attached that shows what those cosmetic and architectural changes were supposed to look like, and this is a rendering. We have elevations and floor plans, not floor plans, but we do have the elevations that we had previously marked as an exhibit that shows these features as well. This is just a colorized rendering to try to give you an image, color view. All right, but we do know what it means because the ordinance had an exhibit attached that demonstrated what was supposed to be done. And it's the applicant's position that what we're proposing is substantially consistent with that.
I think, just a quick comment. I think, Mr. Trocken, we have not met, but it's clear you're a very passionate guy. Very passionate about how you feel about the site and its overall maintenance and care. And I think what Councilman Warman is alluding to, that we know that when the new buildings are constructed, they're going to be constructed in high quality. And all the trim's going to be dotted, all the I's are going to be dotted, the T's are going to be crossed, and all the trim's going to be lined up perfect, and all the doors are going to be perfectly square. So as we talk then about substantially similar cosmetically, which is appearance, right, appearance related, with respect to the new buildings, there are on the existing buildings fascia that's cracked, or soffits that have holes, or sections where the brick is cut out and there were window units that are put in that no longer exist. So we just want to make sure that the substantially similar that the new buildings will be ultimately will match what the old buildings will become.
Right,
to
so
speak.
remember, the language in the ordinance says that the renovation of the existing buildings has to be substantially consistent with Exhibit B.
Correct.
And the new, the existing buildings, the new buildings have to be similar in style and appearance as Exhibit C. And when you look at Exhibit B and Exhibit C to the ordinance, it shows you how the two buildings can be similar, and that's what's being proposed. I mean, it's just entirely consistent with the ordinance.
Yes.
I think you're missing a point that I'm saying. What I'm saying is if I have a problem today with my sockets, we fix it. Now, I'm sure you haven't gone to my comp list, and if you have, by the way, you're more than happy to come and look, and if you can find stuff you think, I'll be more than happy to fix stuff. We fix stuff all the time, okay? And we don't wait for a councilman or a city or inspectors to come. We look at ourselves. I have maintenance people, I have management people who go to the complex and see if there's a problem, we fix it. We had a call 3 days ago that there was a hornet nest on the top of the building that was causing hornets. We sent our guy to take the hornet nest out. He took a ladder, he went up there and did it. I mean, this is routine when you're in the apartment building business. I'm not, please, let me finish.
Of course.
These are not slums. You know, I don't have slum apartments. I take care of my apartments. They're very valuable. We have people living there. We treat them with respect. We keep the property in great condition. And when you said that, oh, the new buildings are going to be so much better, by the way, sir, due respect, no. The new buildings have no comparison to the older buildings. They're not built as well. They're not built because they're not built the same manner, and you can't find the technicians that worked then 60 years ago of today. They don't have that labor. They don't have that intensity. And I'm a plastic surgeon. I also own a boat company down the street. You know, and I know the difference between great workmanship and regular workmanship and shoddy workmanship. It's very, very hard to get the workmanship that was done in that building, because I was there building it with them. And I'm telling you, we're going to make sure that it's a great place to live, and I'm going to be proud of the new building as I am of the old building. And yes, we're going to make sure if there's any problems with the old building, we're going to fix it. But, you know, I'm not rebuilding the old buildings. Let me make it clear. I'm not taking down the, you know, the rafters and rebuilding everything because it doesn't need it. There's a problem, I fix it. But as far as cosmetic, our agreement with the city was pretty clear. They didn't say, Dr. Trocchi, you have to take it apart and rip out everything and put everything brand new. Didn't say that. It said pure and simple cosmetic. And you have attorneys who understand, you know, what the language is and the difference between cosmetic and structural. It's very, we're basically putting stuff on it for cosmetic purposes, not for structural purposes, and nor are we doing it for replacement purposes. Even though inside the apartments, we have modernized many of them, giving them new kitchens, making new bathrooms. You know, apartments look great, and they're big. But, you know, I'm not taking that building apart and rebuilding it. I'm going to make it look better, because cosmetically, but really, my tenants are very happy the way it is now. In fact, a lot of them are saying, what are you doing this for? You know, they like it the way it is. We paint, there's a problem, we fix. You know, I'm not even sure they're going to really love the new changes, but, you know, I'm going to do it anyhow because I told the city that's what I'm going to do, and I always do exactly what I said.
Thank you, Dr. Trocchi.
So just one
That's
quick,
okay, Councilman.
quick comment. I did, just so you are aware, I did take a look at the property. I was out there earlier today. I was out there 2 weeks ago, and then preceding this for our first meeting, I was out on the property. So I did get the opportunity to go out and take a look. I understand that things are going to be cosmetic and not structural. And I don't know if I use the term that the new buildings are going to be better, but more so that as the new buildings are constructed, there's not going to be gaps in fascia, or there's not going to be missing paint, or there's not going to be missing bricks, and some small items like that. So these renderings, we're aware that as they print, sometimes colors are a little different. It's hard to tell if the fascia or if these things are new or if they're painted. So the line of questioning isn't so much accusatory. It's more, we're trying to just determine at a high level what we think will be done. So I just want to make sure you understand where my line of questioning ultimately
Okay.
Going back to the big picture, 2016, when there was an ordinance change that was adopted to allow this project?
Yes.
Correct.
In that ordinance change, there was a rendering of proposed facade renovations. It wasn't, nothing to do with the interior, it was just facade renovations. That was the basis of what we were obligated to do as far as the renovation of the existing building. The proposed facade renovations that I'm proposing are substantially similar to the facade renovations that were proposed from the 2016 ordinance in a different rendering, and that's what we're presenting today. As far as the rehabilitation of any deficient materials on the facade, I will be providing notes to my drawings that as they are cleaning and repainting, if anything is deficient, it will be replaced or repaired as required.
Yes, and you guys have made that very clear that if there are deficiencies found, that they will be corrected, and I'm comfortable that that is the case.
Thank you, Councilman. All right, so if we can move on to the second part of your exhibit, which I've marked A17, is shown on sheet 20 of your packet. When we were here last month, or I'm sorry, it was June. We were here in June, we marked exhibit A4, which is sheet 4 of your packet, and the bottom part of that was a rendering of the clubhouse. And the board asked us to provide you something larger so that you could see the brick effect at the bottom and some of the features of the clubhouse a little cleaner. So we provided you with A17, which is sheet 20. Mr. Colchins, if you could just point out the architectural features, or the materials features of the proposed clubhouse.
So as I explained last time, the exterior is going to be the same basic materials that are being proposed on the apartment buildings, brick wainscot, a mix of clapboard siding and board-back siding along the wainscot. The major changes from the rendering that was presented at the last meeting and the rendering presented today is the roof color is going to be the same color as the existing roofs. And also on the rendering that was presented last time, there's stone veneer wainscot with brick as intended, so the rendering is updated to show the veneer. Think about the one the existing roofs.
Thank you. Okay, so with respect to new building renderings, we had previously marked exhibits, I'm going to tell you which one it was. I have it all marked here. Sorry, I lost my place. I had my thumb on it. Okay, so we were still on A4, on sheet 4. That showed a different color palette than what we now know the ordinance was requesting. So we are now disregarding that exhibit. That prior rendering of the new buildings is no longer going to be the rendering that's proposed. All right, that exhibit is no longer going to apply. Unfortunately, we only got the exhibits to the ordinance from Mr. Malinsky about 2 weeks ago, when I submitted them to the board. I submitted the ordinance to the board secretary with all the exhibits under cover letter on July 21st. It was right after I got them. So everybody's backed up. We haven't had enough time. That wasn't enough time for us to put this image on a board. But Dr. Trocchi has indicated to me that if you turn to sheet 21, which has been marked as A18, that is a blow-up of Exhibit B from the ordinance. That is what the requirement is, that the new building renderings will be similar in style and, let me get you the exact phrasing. Appearance and style as Exhibit B. So what we are telling you today is that the blow-up of Exhibit B that we have is sheet 21 is what the applicant is proposing at this time. If there's any changes, of course, during architectural review, because now we have this rendering, it's going to be a little bit of change. Of course, we would let the board know. But Dr. Trocchi's intention, the applicant's intention, is to make the new buildings look similar to the rendering that is attached to the ordinance.
This is what the new buildings will look like, and there should be some consistency in the architectural elevations of the existing buildings when they are renovated to the new buildings.
So the architectural consistency can be shown in the exhibits to the ordinance, the exhibit indicating the proposed renovation, and exhibit regarding the new building style. This rendering was prepared by the applicant back when the ordinance was negotiated. So if you look at those two renderings side by side, the exhibits B and C to the ordinance, you will see the similarities. So, yes, I was just going to ask him to do that. So using Exhibit B for the new building, Mike, and Exhibit A16 as the rendering of the renovation for the existing building, can you point out the architectural similarities?
Could you say what page those are? Because when you say the exhibit, I'm trying to
So
locate the
Exhibit
pages.
A18 is blown up on sheet 21. All right? And the Exhibit C to the ordinance is shown on sheet 13.
So sheet 13 is the renovation of existing buildings, exterior, and sheet 21 is the construction and exterior of new buildings.
Correct. It's the same that's attached to the ordinance. It's in Exhibit A9. We just blew it up to make it easier to see. All right. So,
The brick will be, the new brick will match the existing brick. We have
Gable.
gable roofs. Some materials are going to be similar.
I think the only difference is that the existing buildings don't have shutters, is that correct? And on this rendering, it shows some shutters, and I think to make it consistent, they're not going to be shutters. But again, the requirement in the ordinance is that the new buildings be similar in appearance and style, not substantially consistent. So we're able to make some of those changes just to make them consistent.
Can you highlight the changes to the existing buildings architecturally that will be done in order to make that more consistent with the new architecture?
Yeah, can you go back, would you mind going back through that again? I know you just did it, but go ahead.
The elements of the new building that
Yeah.
we
What
No.
are you going to do on the facades of the existing buildings to make it more consistent with the architecture being proposed on the new buildings?
The changes to the existing building facade.
The porch design is going to be more in keeping with new construction than 1960s construction. The gables facing the street are going to be matching gables facing the street on the new building.
You said the porch, did you say the porch design?
Could you point that out? You mean this area here?
The low porch
Yeah.
roof, the detailing on the low porch roof is going to be similar to the detailing on the new buildings. The gables that we're adding facing the street.
Is that an existing element on the existing buildings?
No, this is new. These three gables are new.
Right. What about the porch?
There's a porch roof, but it's supported by spindly aluminum columns, and the detailing on it is very poor. Just doing the size of something like a gable. I'm proposing to replace the aluminum columns with more substantial build-up wood columns. I'm proposing a wraparound roof, new fascia.
On the cover?
On the porch? How about the balconies? Are you doing anything with the fascia there?
Clean and repaint the existing, clean and repaint the railings.
And repair if required?
Repair or replace as needed.
If necessary, only if necessary.
Okay.
So real quick, on page 21, that's what the buildings are going to look like, the new buildings.
Except there won't be shutters,
Okay.
because there aren't shutters on the existing building.
So if you go back to your page 5, are you still going to have the open stairways to get into these buildings, or are we changing that too?
So we have to, what are we doing? Well, the architectural plans themselves have to be reviewed to be more consistent with this. So it'll be more consistent with this. I don't have an answer for you right now. We were still working through the changes to the architecturals that are needed to make it more consistent with this rendering.
If you do how would that be done?
I'm sorry?
If you do try to do that, how would you do that?
Okay, again, number one, that's why I hire an architect, and, that's his expertise, but I've been building since I was 12 years old, so, not such a big issue. But, you know, the thing I was going to bring up to you is realistically, the previous drawings that we had, in my limited opinion of only building a few thousand apartments, is a much better plan than this conceptual plan. So, you know, the one we had previously with the coloring like this. But the previous plan the architect did, because he didn't have this, is much better than this plan, to be blunt. You know, and I would recommend the board, you know, give us the latitude to do the other type of plan, because I think it's a much better plan than this one. But if the board says, no, we have to follow exactly this, then we're gonna do exactly this. But I still say the other plan is a better plan, much more efficient, much easier maintenance, and a much better looking at it long-term than this plan. But this was the one, and it was conceptually this, because, you know, we didn't know exactly what we were gonna do. But, you know, we have the other plan, so my recommendation is if you say the other plan is better, you know, I'm more than happy to use the other plan. If you say, no, we have to use this, then I'll build this one.
No, we're not making a value judgment on which plan is a better plan. We're just asking you to be specific about what you're going to do.
Yeah, we're doing this plan because this is what was accepted on the ordinance. So that's why we had it. We're going to be doing this plan. But I say that. But if the board allows me, I'd rather do the other plan. I think it's a much better plan. But neither here nor there. Mr. Colchin's did the other plan. This was done years ago before Mr. Colchin was involved. And he came out with a much better plan. I want to give him credit. He did a great job.
Well, all due respect, Dr. Trocchi, which plan are we doing?
Well, again, I will do either one that you tell me. If you tell me you got to follow this, we'll do this one. If you say the other one, I'll do the other one.
So the
Pretty
reason,
easy.
right, and the reasonable compromise here would be, since the ordinance says it has to be similar, it doesn't have to be substantially consistent like the renovation exhibit, the compromise here would be to take the architectural structure, the floor plan and elevation that we showed you before, and impose this color and this material board on it. We just didn't have enough time to put that together for you. So the idea would be to have, if you go back to exhibit A4,
We need to see that.
that's the architectural styling. Don't look at the colors, just look at the style of the building. It's very similar to what Exhibit C looks like. It's got some differences, but the colors would then be consistent with what we have now for the existing buildings, instead of gray.
You want to do, so it's essentially that on sheet A4,
Right.
this architectural style, they'd like to build that architectural style, but with the design feature of
With gables,
18,
right, with
the
gables.
and the brick.
The brick,
So
the
it-
white, what do you call it, clapboard siding, to be
Right.
consistent with the clubhouse, and the new features on the front of the gate, the new gables and the new
So
porch.
aesthetically, it looks like this, but design plan wise and layout, what the layout, access, entrance, egress would look like this.
That's correct.
Yes.
And colors. Colors.
And colors, yes.
So when do you think we could see that?
You have it right here. So
Yeah.
just see the colors are different. That's all.
We'll give it to, what I'd like to do is give it to, you've given instructions, your intentions are clear. I'd like to give it to Mr. Weiser and Mr. Herman as a condition of approval. If they think it's if they can show it to you, as long as everybody thinks it's consistent with the testimony that's provided tonight, we would be fine. If not, then you're going to tell us, hey, we don't think this is consistent with what we approved, and you need to come talk to us some more.
Well, I guess we would talk about that at one of our meetings with our professionals.
Correct.
We meet twice a month, so it's not like we're going to hold you up.
Correct.
If-
I'm not in a position tonight to really want to ask or be able to request or even agree to putting off a vote any further. I think you've got substantial testimony on the record. The testimony is everything will be consistent. You have the visuals that show you what it's going to look like. All you want is something that puts the two together, and we can do that as a condition of approval.
When you said color schemes, I'm sorry, you might have confused me a little bit, that you would be leveraging the gray.
We are no longer applying a gray color
Okay,
scheme.
so what was the color schemes you mentioned?
Go
You
back-
mentioned these colors.
That's correct.
Correct, okay, so this overall layout.
That overall-
Building design structure.
Correct.
But with this substantially similar
Similar-
cosmetic design elements.
Similar design, yes.
Okay.
Okay, since I'm gonna be the one who's gonna have to review this, let me try to take a whack at this so I understand.
That's
okay?
fair.
So, the one that's up there now, not that one, I'm sorry. The one that had the gray design,
That is on
A04.
A04. And I think we have the blow up of it here, so we can bring it back up. It's that sheet 4 in your packet.
Okay.
There it is.
Okay.
Page 4.
So just let me ask the question, is it a correct statement to say that the building with the features and everything is going to look like this, it's just the color scheme is going to be the more brick style color scheme?
Brick and white clapboard, yes.
And white clapboard, as opposed to the gray clapboard?
Correct.
Okay, so this is the elevation. The elevation, I'll try to talk in architectural terms. This is the elevation, but with the brick and the white clapboard.
We would superimpose the elements, the color elements.
I believe I understand. At the risk of keeping my fingers crossed, I believe I understand.
So just, in summary, when the project is 100% complete, every building's front door is going to be the same color.
Yes.
And the roofs are going to be as close as possible, considering that the older roofs are existing and they're not going to replace, I understand.
Correct.
But we're going to the color of the older roofs.
That's correct. We're going to be consistent with the existing buildings in color.
Again, I as you know, I love to beat the dead horse. In the bottom of that picture there's a crosswalk going to the clubhouse. We're going to put crosswalks wherever they're needed by residential standards.
I can address the discrepancy.
Well, before you do that, the site will comply with the residential site improvement standards. If RSIS requires crosswalks, that's where they'll be.
I should have rephrased that. If the building inspector, when he's out there doing it, says, hey, put some hash marks across this one here, we're talking about 40 feet of hash marks. I don't think that's going to put the project over the edge. So in other words, for the kids, when they're walking down these paths to get to the next section, if they have to cross a parking lot, which I agree, they're not going to use they're going to use the parking lots, but put some crosswalks in, not just painted, where they're needed. Where if the building inspector wants them when he's out there, if he doesn't, he doesn't want them.
Again, paint is easy, I'm happy to paint. No problem.
I figured that would be the answer.
Yeah, and I mean, there's not very many locations.
Absolutely, there's not.
Where these paths are going to be crossing the roadway.
Yeah, I was just more concerned with up front there between the, going into that area there and then going to the clubhouse.
Right.
There's two, basically the two would be the more prevalent ones of the two, right up there. But again, I don't need that. That doesn't need to be an emotion or anything like that. I mean, that's just a suggestion.
No problem.
Ms. Walters, are we going to eventually get a document that we're going to be able to attach to the DNR that is going to be a combination of A18 and A04?
Yes, that's.
Stuart is going to review, and then I can prepare that and attach that to the DNR.
Yes, if that's your preference, we can do that.
These are not rooms, that's just open stairway.
How long do you believe it will take you
It's
to
going
get
to be
to that?
this building, right?
So
So it's going to have these. open.
Mr. Colchin's, we have an outside rendering.
So this is not part of the
Somebody else
apartment.
prepares the renderings based upon Mr. Colchin's architectural plans. That gentleman is a little backed up, but it's going to be a couple weeks, but it's going to take, not months, so 2 to 3 weeks maybe, but Mr. McGarty's going to need time to prepare a resolution anyway, and we're going to work through the terms of that no matter what. So it'll be done, we'll have it done and turned in, so you can review it prior to adoption of the resolution.
Anything else, ma'am?
No, actually, Chairman, I have nothing else this evening.
Any questions, any further questions from this gentleman? Very well. Town engineer, your comments, please.
Yes, sir. Well, I believe last meeting we went through the report. I won't go through that again, but I will update you. I did have a conversation and email with Mr. Wright regarding our outstanding issue in the report. We've come to an agreement on everything. One thing we are still working through, and it's pretty minor, is just the water services, the water mains. I've met with the water department. I got their input. I fed it to Mr. Resch. We're going back and forth. We're going to loop the water main through the site, add a couple more hydrants, and get the fire marshal and the water department what they need. So I have nothing further based on the testimony tonight, sir.
Any questions of the town engineer?
To get the water to run uphill on that little piece going out to Common.
Yeah, he's really, it's tight as can be. It's, like I said, I think last meeting you mentioned, it's about 300 cubic feet of water. Is, if we were to eliminate the sidewalk that we're making them put in there, he'd meet their standards. So, I personally, I feel like, the sidewalk's warranted there. So to me, it's a valid trade-off. I mean, if he were to redesign the entrance, it's a lot of earthwork, a lot of, it wouldn't really work. So again, if the sidewalk was eliminated, he would meet all the stormwater rules. So in my opinion, it's very negligible. You won't even see any issues.
School.
I'm waiting for him to start. He's going to bring it up.
Very well. Town planner, your comments.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. As Mr. Herman said, we went through our report at length last time. The only thing I have that I want to add is that we had the discussion very early on in the evening about Ms. Walters' conversation with Mr. Malinsky, and then further conversations with our solicitor, with Mr. Malinsky about the location, the intended location of the clubhouse along the front of the project. In reading body language, it didn't seem like the board was really loving the idea of something that isn't in the ordinance being interpreted. I just want to clear that up, because if you go to A15 in the packet that was submitted this evening, and the sketch, the concept plan which was adopted as part of the ordinance, is what I was sort of trying to get to earlier. Picture's worth 1,000 words, and it clarifies the language. You do see the clubhouse along the 12th Street right-of-way in the front of the project. So I just wanted to point that out, that was what was anticipated as part of the ordinance that was adopted a number of years ago. And that sort of corroborates what Ms. Walters said, what Mr. McGrarty said, and now we have it. Just wanted to point it out to you in picture form. So with that, I really don't have anything else to add.
Any questions?
Just to follow up on what Mr. Weiser just said, in my opinion, that would mean that you do not need a C variance for the clubhouse. It was part of the ordinance. It was always anticipated to be its current location.
Yeah, that was the part I forgot to say. Right. Thank you. I appreciate that.
Thank you, thank you. Yes.
If I may follow up on that, I forgot to mention earlier, Section B, General Provisions of the Ordinance, it's Exhibit A9, Sheet 9, the first half of the page. If I can read it to you, I think this actually gives you what you need in addition to what, thank you, Mr. Weiser just said. Because this ordinance provides specialized regulations for housing types, land use, improvements, site planning, and building design within the IDZ, the standards and requirements of this ordinance supersede and replace all conflicting provisions in the Town of Hammonton Developmental Ordinance and Zoning Ordinance, except for exceptions not relevant here. So that means that the outside provision, different provision of your zoning code that dictates accessory structures cannot be in the front yard is superseded by this ordinance, which dictates the location of the clubhouse in where it's been proposed, consistent with the concept plan. So I think that further bolsters the position that a variance cannot be required for the location of the clubhouse in the front yard. Thank you.
That's COA, right?
I'm sorry?
That's COA, right? This is based on COA?
No. This language, the ordinance and the agreement were negotiated as part of the affordable housing process, but this language indicates specifically for this ordinance that it supersedes and replaces all your other zoning ordinances, except with respect to stormwater and things not related to the variance location or the clubhouse location at issue here.
Thank you. At this time, I'd like to call on Hammonton Planning Board member, Sri Scipione, to read to us a letter from the superintendent. Please go ahead.
You've got it. Let's see if this mic's on you.
Before we go there, if
Yeah.
I may, Mr. McGarty, documents that were written and not by persons who are not here and subject to cross-examination are inadmissible. Even though we're in a laid-back forum and the strict rules of evidence don't apply, documents that are written by somebody who's not here that I can't cross-examine are inadmissible before, it doesn't give the applicant a fair and reasonable
Very well, you
opportunity.
got a copy, right?
I have a copy, yes.
Okay.
Well, as the board representative, I'll just go through a couple of concerns that the board has. Can I do that? We can
Sure.
do that, right?
Yes.
Ms. Kieko was here. She just left probably 20 minutes ago. She lives about an hour away, and she worked all day, so she was here. The board's concern is if there was an impact study completed related to the financial burden to the district, that was a concern.
Are you asking me?
Yeah, do you want, you want me to just go through the concerns and then you could just, at the end,
I believe all your concerns are related to fiscal impact, correct?
yes.
All right. I did read that letter and, or that email, and I do have a response for that.
Okay.
Pursuant to the case of Molino versus Mayor and Council of the Borough of Gibbsboro, fiscal impacts are improper zoning considerations the board cannot take into consideration. Same as the board cannot consider the benefits, tax benefits of a new commercial rateable in making its decision. The board cannot consider the potential fiscal impact of a new residential development in taking its vote or making its consideration. I'll read you the language. This is Mr. McGarty, 116 NJ Super 195. Fiscal, it says the attempt to equate the cost of education to the number of children allowed in a project or a community has no relation to zoning. The governmental cost must be an official concern, but not to an extent that it determines who shall live in the municipality. Zoning is not a boundless license to structure a municipality. So it's not a legitimate land use concern for the board. Even if it were, I'll point out to you, which it's not, the fiscal impact of this project was assumed by the governing body when it negotiated for the provision of new housing here, including affordable housing units. And it was taken into account by town council, or it's presumed to have been taken into account by town council when they adopted the ordinance. In addition, the fiscal impact requirement for this application was explicitly waived in the IDZ ordinance. The IDZ ordinance in section B, with the section I actually just read from but didn't continue, expressly waives the an environmental impact statement. And in your code, section 17599, which deals with environmental impact statements, a fiscal impact analysis and the types of considerations that the school board is trying to raise are part of your environmental impact study. We established at the last meeting and before the Environmental Commission that environmental impact study was not required, was expressly accepted from this application because of the process that led to the development of the IDZ ordinance. It was a unnecessarily cost-generative feature. So with all due respect to the board, we hear you, we understand you, but any potential impact on the school district is not a valid zoning consideration for the land use board. And I might note that the projection in that email of potential number of students has no bearing in reality. I don't even know where that number comes from. There are approximately 20 students in the existing 52 units. We're 3 times that is going to be the number of units, so 3 times that is 60 units. The email projected 200 students. I have no idea where that number came from.
Thank you very much. Any questions?
So you're projecting 60 to 80? I mean, and I know, no, can't hold you to it.
I have no actual projection.
Yeah.
All right, but
There's only
if you
20
just-
students out of the whole development now?
Currently, there's 20
Wow.
students, according to, I believe that Mr. Resch might be able to provide, he had a conversation with Ms. Mazza.
Okay.
Any further questions? Do you have anything further, ma'am?
No, thank you, Chairman.
I'd like to open it up to the public. Anybody from the public wishes to be heard? Nobody from the public wishes to be heard? The public portion is now closed. Mr. Solicitor, where do we stand?
I'm going to need a motion to approve Hammonton Gardens application for a preliminary and final major site plan on block 1201, lots 5 and 5.01, with the consolidation of both lots. Or particularly, the applicant seeks approval to construct 4 new apartment buildings, 84 units to accompany the 5 existing apartment buildings on the site, which is located in the Hammonton Exclusionary Development Zoning District, Ordinance 12-2016. And the motion is to approve that with all the conditions and exhibits that will be in the DNR that will be attached. And will be approved by this board once they're done.
Before we move forward, I apologize. I did have a couple quick questions I just wanted to ask through the professionals. First, I want to thank Ms. Walters and the team for what's been 5 hours of meetings over the course of the last 2 meetings. So I appreciate you hanging tough with us. We want to make sure we get this right. There's a lot of people that are going to live here, a large percentage of our community, so we want to make sure that we get this right along the way. At least as I see it, this is just my thought. I don't love that there's not going to be sidewalk in front, but I agree with Mr. McGrady that we don't have the ability to enforce what was previously agreed upon by council in 2016. I don't love that it's not going to be there, but I can't allow it to sway my decision one way or the other. So I appreciate you guys making considerations for a walking path at this time. We already talked about exterior repairs. Question on bed distribution. In our last discussion, we talked that there would be 12 singles, 60 doubles, and 12 triples. And it looks like the plan on page A5 shows 2 and 3 bedroom units on the second floor. And it does show that there's 4 on the second floor, 3 units, that's 12. But in the original ordinance and resolution, under the residential site improvement standards, it states that there's 3 1-bedrooms, 78 2-bedrooms, and 3 3-bedrooms. So what is the applicant bound to? Are they looking to do 12, 60, and 12, or is it 3, 78, and 3? And Mr. McGrady, I guess question for you, 3, 78, and 3 is what was approved under Exhibit A, within Exhibit A, under the original resolution. So is that our required bed distribution?
Can you indicate which section of the ordinance you're pointing to?
Yes, so I apologize. On the top of Exhibit A, there is a chart that shows parking requirements and what was intended units. So it's a top of Exhibit A in the IDZ zone, which I apologize on your...
So you're referring to Exhibit A to the ordinance?
Yes, sorry, Exhibit
Okay.
A to the ordinance, which in your packet it's the conceptual plan.
What page are you looking at?
Sheet 18.
Yep, sheet 18. At the top, under residential site improvement standards, parking requirements, but it gives units, an intended number of units of 3 singles, 78 doubles, 3 triples. We heard testimony in the last meeting that it was intended to be 12 singles, 60 doubles, and 12 triples. And we got square footage for those, and that's what's showcased here. So I don't know, Mr. McGrady, what is the applicant bound to, just given what was included in the original resolution, and what is the applicant actually asking?
So before you respond to that, if I may, the issue that we have is we have an affordable housing obligation here, and those 13 affordable housing units, we have specified bedroom distributions within that 13 units. No more than 20% can be 1 bedroom, at least 30% have to be 2 bedroom, at least 20% have to be 3 bedroom. So when you start doing and then the balance of units, which I think equates to 2 or 3, are at the developer's discretion, but have to be 2 or 3 bedroom, cannot be 1 bedroom. So we cannot strictly comply with this chart because we have to meet the affordable housing requirement for bedroom distribution, and that's going to require more three-bedroom than what's shown here.
Okay.
That's part of the ordinance, do we need a variance for that?
That is part of the
I'm
ordinance.
sorry, I didn't hear the
I said if that's part of the ordinance, do we need a variance for that?
We don't need a variance for that because your ordinance requires us to comply with the uniform housing affordability controls on income qualification and bedroom distribution. And those UHAC rules supersede, they require a different breakdown on those units, which is going to require more three-bedroom.
Understood. I understand the board's concern because to a great extent tonight we held towards the strict interpretation of the ordinance and its exhibits. I think what they're asking is that the chart that is on top of Exhibit A to the ordinance, where did those numbers come from, and do you need, why should that not be considered part of the requirements, albeit contrary to fair housing, which may be a legitimate explanation, but do we need a variance from what the ordinance says, which is Exhibit A?
So the body of the ordinance doesn't have a required bedroom distribution. It's shown on a chart on a concept plan that's attached, but the body of the ordinance does require the applicant in section G, give me 17, and its subsections to require, to comply with the uniform housing affordability controls, which governs bedroom distribution. We necessarily have to have more than three-bedroom units in order to comply with the uniform housing affordability controls. There's nothing we can do to that. And so I would argue to you then that your ordinance, if you're going to apply the chart from the concept plan and compare that to the straight language in the ordinance requiring UHAC coordination and compliance, that then you have inconsistent ambiguity in your ordinance itself. And it's got to be resolved in favor of the affordable housing.
I think the question goes, and I guess you're saying it's inconsistent, but you do acknowledge on the exhibit for which we relied upon helping the court's feet to the fire on that you're asking in this particular instance, again, in all fairness, the concept plan was reviewed by both the applicant and the city council, albeit it appears to be a little bit inconsistent with the language. Would a variance be necessary from Exhibit A?
My position is your ordinance is ambiguous, contradictory and somewhat ambiguous in that regard. We have to comply with UHAC. That's the whole point of doing this, is the affordable housing. The whole point of this ordinance is to ensure that you get your affordable housing. So the plain language of the ordinance says comply with UHAC. To the extent that that is inconsistent, I don't think it's a variance. I think it's an interpretation of the ordinance to make sure we're consistent with the affordable housing obligations.
So I'm not an affordable housing expert, but and I'm certainly not going to pretend to be. So I guess that as a condition of approval, if it's not going to be that bedroom distribution and it was going to be another bedroom distribution, that would be subject to the review of our affordable housing lawyer who oversees that to verify that the bedroom distribution is going to align with what is required.
You actually have an affordable housing administrator.
We
It's
do.
required part of every settlement with
Correct.
Fair Share Housing Center. And your ordinance on that is court-approved, just like this ordinance was court-approved. So your affordable housing administrator is the responsible person to coordinate with the developer to ensure that the bedroom distribution is complied with, to ensure that the income qualification requirements are satisfied. That's who usually acts as the municipal liaison with the developer to ensure that all of those affordable housing obligations are complied with. And we're agreeing to comply with that as a condition of approval, and we're agreeing to work with that municipal housing liaison / administrator to make sure all the requirements are satisfied.
That's all well and good, but what gives us as a board discretion to determine what we listen to and what we don't listen to in the ordinance?
You're actually not a board of interpretation, you're sitting as a planning board.
I know,
It's a
but
zoning board.
We have two different conflicting provisions in the redevelopment
ordinance here?
So if you wanted me to give a justification, I've given you if you want to treat it as a variance, treat it as a variance. But I've given you the justification for the variance. It's a legal requirement for the bedroom distribution to be compliant, for the affordable housing units to be compliant with the Uniform Housing Affordability Control Regulations, which is specifically stated in your code and specifically stated in the town settlement agreement with Fair Share Housing Center, all of which was approved by the court at a fairness hearing many years ago. So if you're going to treat it as a variance, I would suggest to you that the variance needs to be granted in order to remain consistent with the purpose and intent of the ordinance.
So what does the fair housing distribution say on a development like this, 1, 2, and 3 bedroom?
So a maximum of 20% of the percentages I'm about to indicate apply only to the affordable housing units. Okay, so there's 13 affordable housing units. And I have my map somewhere. So we have a maximum of 20% of the units can be 1-bedroom units. When you do 20% of 13, it comes to something over 2. But since you have a maximum of 20%, you have to round down. So it's a maximum of 2 1-bedroom. A minimum of 30% of the units have to be 2-bedroom. That equates to 4. It came out to like 3.8 or 3.6. You round up to 4. And a minimum of 20% of the units have to be 3-bedroom units. Again, it came out to like 2.8, 2.6. You round up to 3. That gives us 9 units. The balance of 4 have to be either 2 or 3-bedroom units at the discretion of the developer. That's what the requirements say. And the plans that we've indicated have more units overall, 2 and 3-bedroom units, and they're spread across the first floor. They're all ADA accessible. There's all kinds of requirements regarding the affordable housing units. That's all in the regulations that we have to comply with.
So maybe my math isn't right, but if 20% that rounds up, 20% minimum need to be 3 bedrooms, that rounds up, that's 3 units. That's the 3 units that are listed here. And then the 3, the 4, and the 2 is 7, that makes 9. It's at the developer and/or the ordinance's discretion if the remaining 4 are either 2 bedrooms or 3 bedrooms.
They have to be 2 or 3-bedroom units. They cannot be 1-bedroom units.
Correct. They have to be 2 or 3 bedrooms. And then none of the remaining market rate have to be 3 bedrooms. That technically, as the way that this is written, 78, 3, and 3, this complies with, as per your percentages, this would comply with the fair share housing requirements.
So then the applicant is going to ask for a variance from the chart that you're referring to on Exhibit C, because that's not what market demands are currently driving. In order for the new units to be saleable, that's the other aspect of this, the applicant has to develop a product that's rentable to the current market. And limiting the new units to 3-bedroom units and maximizing and having 78 2-bedroom units is not consistent with current market demand. So, yeah. Right. So the variance would be justified.
It could be considered a design waiver also, if you're so inclined.
All right, I take it all back.
I agree to this,
He'll comply with the chart.
as long as it agrees to the
Affordable
law
housing.
regulations, it's fine with me.
There you go. Can we take a 3-minute recess?
Of course.
Can we take a 3-minute recess?
So ordered. 3-minute recess.
Thank
So
you.
ordered. Planning Board and the Hammonton Zoning Board of Adjustments for August 3rd, 2022 will come back to order. Mr. Solicitor, the motion is still the same? It's on the floor, or?
Yeah, I think there's some clarification.
Okay.
Chairman.
Whenever you're ready.
And then I have two more quick questions, but I promise they'll be quick. They'll be really quick. Yeah, and just for everybody's thought, the reason in the line of questioning is just purely we've just drawn a lot of attention to the original ordinance and its intentions and us sticking to it. So I just want to make sure that as we work towards sticking to it, if there are going to be deviations, that we call them out and that we appropriately talk about them as a group. So that's really all.
So I don't know that we need, I'm just going to ask Mr. Colchins to verify. Mr. Colchins. There you go.
Okay.
If you could step over there. At the June 15th, 2022 hearing, I believe you testified that the bedroom distribution within the proposed existing architectural plans included 12 one-bedroom units, 60 two-bedroom units, and 12 three-bedroom units. Is that correct?
That is correct.
Okay. So the applicant, what do you prefer? Okay. All right. So the applicant would seek a variance in that event from the zoning chart that is attached, the residential site improvement standard chart that is attached to Exhibit A15, Sheet 18. It was included on the concept plan, which indicated 3 one-bedroom, 78 two-bedroom, 3 three-bedroom units. And Dr. Chalky will explain to you why.
Either way.
Dancing with you.
No, I don't like that one. Anyhow, the reason is because I wanted to put more one-bedrooms in. It only has 3, and there's a lot of single people who just want to be in one bedroom. And I don't want to take, we've had some professionals call me, and they're single professionals, and they want to live in a place with 1 bedroom, and they don't want to pay for 2 bedrooms, so they don't use the 2nd bedroom. So that was the reason why. We want more 1-bedrooms than there was only 3 one-bedrooms before, because we don't have any 1-bedrooms in the whole complex. The old ones are all 2-bedroom. And then the reason why some additional 3-bedrooms is not to have a lot more kids. A lot of the people want 2 bedrooms and a den, but they want it to be a bedroom in case someone comes over to visit, but they're going to use it as a den, but we have to call it legally 3 bedrooms. That's the main reason. All right? Thank you.
And that would be consistent with the architectural plans that were provided to the board prior. Elevations renderings notwithstanding, but the architectural plans themselves.
Any further questions?
You're good.
So to amend my motion, I would add that, I'm sorry,
Yeah.
I do have a couple more.
I just have 2 more questions. Mr. Resch had made, I apologize, 3 more questions. Mr. Resch had made a comment at one point saying that there was curbing only on the south side. When we were talking about existing units and then the construction of the new units, we were talking about curbing. And I think you had mentioned that there was going to be curbing on the south side units, but not on the north side units.
I think that opposite. Curb is on for the new units, there's curb on the north side,
Okay.
no curb on the south side.
Okay. Is there a reason why there's?
When we were looking at the grading aspects of all of it, the south side is the handicap accessible way to get in.
Gotcha.
And that made it much more easier to make everything work properly grading wise.
Okay.
The north side, has curb. Some of the entrances had steps because we had to work with the elevations that are present from the parking areas for building C as well as for D and E. So we couldn't just work with blank slate. We had to go on the elevations, and they're different on the top areas compared to the bottom area.
Okay. So, Mr. Herman, you're in that respect on the south side of the buildings where there won't be curbing abutting the paving. You agree that that is likely more for, grade and drainage type issues, and that's reasonable in your perspective. Okay. The last two things, there was the one trash receptacle. I think there's 4 new trash receptacles, 1 remaining. We said that the one that was remaining was not going to be receiving any privacy screening or doors or rehab. Would the applicant consider aligning that similarly so that it is appropriately screened and has a door as similar to the other 4 new receptacles locations?
I'm more than happy to try. The problem, I may not be able to move it over because I don't have the room
Right.
like the old ones. But to screen it, put a screen or some shrubs, yes.
Yeah, okay, great. And then the last part I had was from our last meeting, we discussed entering into a developer's agreement to ensure the EV stations were installed as per ordinance requirement. Is that something that, Mr. McGrady, that you had on your list of items to consider?
I didn't have it on my list, no.
Okay.
Yeah, so the discussion was really, how does the board enforce that? There's no mechanism in the state statute that addresses that. There's no authority given to municipalities to address, how that gets implemented long-term. It just requires us to have a certain amount and to install them, in certain increments. That is one thing that I didn't have a chance to talk to Dr. Trocki about, as to how we can guarantee the implementation of that, but we're required by state law to do it. And I think with the condition in the ordinance requiring us to put them in as testified to, and the state law that requires us to do it that way, should be in the resolution itself is a sufficient enforcement mechanism. If it doesn't happen, it doesn't happen. And then the town can use the ordinance to enforce that requirement. I think the ordinance, not the ordinance, I'm sorry, I misspoke, the resolution. So I think the resolution of approval to DNR will be sufficient to ensure that those get installed when and as necessary.
Mr. McGrady, do you agree?
I do.
With that? Okay. Okay. At that time, I don't have any other questions, so thank you. Thank you.
I have one. Do we need a notice requirement of variance?
The notice indicated that any and all variance and design waiver or other relief the board might require. We have a catch-all provision. The law allows us to rely upon that when we were unaware of the variance at the time of the application. It was just raised today, so my...
They have a broad-based notice that takes into account, because during meetings, different things come up that may require a variance or design waiver. So the public is put on notice.
Where do we stand?
Seems like every time I speak, somebody
I'm done. I promise. I'm done. No more questions and thoughts.
I don't want to repeat the motion that I made. I will amend that motion to include a variance regarding the bedroom units, particularly the chart on Exhibit A to the ordinance has 3 one-bedrooms, 78 two-bedrooms, and 3 three-bedrooms. The proposal and the need for a variance would change it to 12 one-bedrooms, 62 bedrooms, 12 three-bedrooms, and obviously it would need to comply with the Fair Housing Share Act and also the administrator, that this plan would be run by them for their approval. So that's the motion.
Members of the board, any questions on the motion? No questions, roll call.
I hate-
You need a first and a second.
Oh,
I hate to do this to
sorry.
you, but I just want to clarify for you, for the record, in case somebody thinks about it later. The change in the bedroom distribution does not impact the parking requirement. It's still 272 spaces. We're still providing 272 spaces. Just in case you think about it after the fact and are concerned. Okay?
Okay, backing up, we need a motion.
So move. I'll make a motion.
Make a motion first, second the motion? Second. Mr. Matro, second.
This is
Now we need a roll call.
This is inclusive of the variance?
Yes,
Okay.
for the bedroom distribution, going from what's on the chart to the 12 one-bedrooms, 60 two-bedrooms, and 12 three-bedrooms, which is proposed and in the plans that have been previously submitted.
Okay.
We need a second. We have a second. A roll call. Sorry.
Thank you.
Michael Messina,
Yes.
Gordon Faribault,
Yes.
Mickey Palia,
Yes.
Ray Schipione,
No.
Councilman Oliva,
No.
Councilman Willerman,
No.
James Matro.
No.
Chairman Marinelli. sorry.
Yes. Where do we stand?
That's it.
May I interrupt for a second before the final decision? Let me make it clear, gentlemen. I'm trying to make a nice complex. If you're telling me there's something you want me to change, like Mr. Olivia, to change on it, let me know now. Because what I don't want to do is have a long-term, I built these apartments 60 years ago. I don't want to be in litigation with the city over this. Trust me, I don't want to. I'm a very reasonable person. This is a very reasonable project. It's been 6 years in the making. So if there's something that can be changed, that someone tell me that would make a difference, I'm more than happy to listen now, as opposed to going to court, spending maybe $1 million to $2 million of legal fees for the city or more, for no reason, when if it's something simple that can be changed. So if any of the people here have a reason what they think would be reasonable to make a change, I'm here to listen. But if you're telling me, no, that's it, I have to explain to you, but, just to let you know, I'm a reasonable guy. But when something's unreasonable, I do what I have to do. And this is a COLA requirement, so it's not even me who's going to be suing. It's the state. And, and I'm telling you, there's no reason for it. If there's something small that needs to be changed, let me know now. That's why I'm here, and that's why I came.
Can, Mr. McGarty, can we, would we be able to, and I apologize, I should have asked this prior, would we be able to separate the approval and the variance request?
Yes.
This variance for the bedroom distribution and the approval for the remainder of the project?
Get the temperature of the board to see whether the variance was a linchpin in it, that I didn't sense it was, so I combined it with you.
And I apologize, because I should have made that known on my behalf. For me, the variance is a modifier for me. I think this project is a good thing. I think this is a project I'd like to see. I'd like to increase bedrooms in our community. I'd like to allow for increased housing. We need more bedrooms in the community. I think what was originally agreed upon in the ordinance in terms of bedroom distribution is a sticking point for me. If the applicant will be willing to separate that variance from the approval of the remainder of the project, I would be open to that.
I withdraw the request for the variance.
Okay.
So,
So the original motion was the application with the variance. Can we take a second vote on the application without the variance?
so just so we're on the same page, are we going back to 370? I can
Yes.
barely read
Yes,
that.
378.
3 and 3 and the 78.
Okay.
It would be consistent with Exhibit A, which
Okay.
is the design ordinance.
I was just having a hard time reading this fine print, so it's kind of like,
Okay, let me go through this again. Could I have a motion to approve the preliminary and final site plan approval for Hamilton Gardens, Block 1201, lots 5 and 5.01, with consolidation of both lots, without the variance, simply for preliminary and final site plan approval? Could I have that motion?
I'll make that motion.
I'll second.
Motion.
Discussion on the motion. The applicant asked, what could they bring to the table that would have a substantial impact on my vote? And I believe that asking for the existing units to be brought up to standard with new windows and new doors and all the facade treatments to make them essentially new in my mind and compliant with the new construction that's going to occur would go a long way. I have been through the development, and I don't think just patching and painting is going to do it. And I don't think, in my mind, that we're asking them to tear down the buildings. We're not asking them to put in new rafters. I think 60-year-old windows and 60-year-old doors need to be replaced.
My obligation as solicitor is to make sure that the board is aware of the consequences of its decision, and obviously their requirement is to comply with the ordinance and the language of the ordinance. To the extent that a judge concludes that they have done that, the other wants and desires are irrelevant to this discussion. I caution on that.
So Ed, what I'll say to that is, sitting on council in 2016 when this came about, and Gordon was on when COA came about with this, this was sort of presented as, from COA, this is the deal, sign it. What was said in the meetings, the spirit of the meetings, might have been interpreted by the council side as something completely different than made it to the paper. But as I did ask Joe this when I walked in here tonight. I asked the solicitor that when I walked in here tonight, and he said, what's on paper is what we have to go by. What was the spirit of the discussions is maybe the interpretation of the spirit of the discussions is not what was made it to the paper.
And
So.
I guess the other caution I'll have, and on a broader level, and your solicitor will weigh in, I already spoke to him on this, is you run the possibility of running afoul, if you disapprove this, running afoul of the housing settlement, which of course was tortuously negotiated, and the city at that point was satisfied with it. So I caution you, careful of how you step here.
And can I just make a,
If we have to vote yes, then what's the point?
can I say I like to say something too. I was on the planning board way back when too, when all this happened, before they even got involved in this. And we sat here with COA for, I don't know how many meetings. And we were pretty much told what we had to do. To be honest, we were pretty much told what we had to do.
I'm pointing to the
And we were also told that if it could be very, very costly if we don't.
So, to further Ed's frustration, today I rode around through every complex in the town of Hammonton. There's only one that doesn't have sidewalks in front of the cars. It's this one. They're making money somehow.
It's
So,
a cost-generative feature that was excluded. I don't know what
I'm
else to
just
say to
saying,
you, Mr.
you
Polino.
asked, that Dr. Traki specifically asked our feelings. So that's where our apprehension comes from, things like that. I mean, I think that you made wonderful strides in making the buildings look similar, and I commend that, so I think that you're gonna get a nice project when it's done. And the walking paths, you didn't have to add them, you did add them, so I also commended you for that earlier, if you remember. But that, where my frustration comes from, and I am concerned about the amount of kids in the school. It's a concern, but that's the town, that should have been a concern in 2016, not in 2022, unfortunately, so.
If I may answer, I live in a very nice community, Margate, thank God. I was able to live there because I always wanted to. And I always wanted to live in a city that had sidewalks. Because in Mays Landing, there were no sidewalks. In my chicken farm, we barely had a place to walk. We didn't have a gravel path to walk. I live in Margate, in a very nice community, very nice area, and I do not have sidewalks on my entire street. Okay, so, I mean, it's nice to have sidewalks, maybe, but I don't have sidewalks at my house. What I'm just trying to say is, the department has been there 60 years without sidewalks. We haven't had one accident, one problem. Now, I'm working with you, as you can see, with Mr. Olivio. I said I'll change without the variance. I'm trying to work with you guys. I don't want to be, another 50 years fighting with you guys or whatever. But on the other hand, I'm a fighter. My parents were fighters. You know, that's why they lived through the Holocaust and the Nazis didn't kill them. Okay? And I'm telling you again, I'll fight. I don't want to. Okay? But my answer is this. This is a complex. It's always been there. The city has no complaints about my complex. We take care of our tenants. So we don't have problems. And your lawyer told you that this is what was approved 6 years ago. And remember, it's taken 6 years for this city to even consider me finally to build them. I wanted to build them 6 years ago when the costs were much less. Today the cost is double. So, 6 years.
Actually, no offense, I just want to sort of move this forward. I think the comment section is done. We have a motion on the floor. It's been first and second. We need a roll call. I believe it's been first and second.
It
I
has.
was
Yeah,
the first.
I was the second.
Gordon was the second, minus the variance off the table.
Variance is not included,
Yes.
just for the site plan.
Michael Messina,
Yes.
Gordon Faribault,
Yes.
Mickey Palia,
Yes.
Ray Schipione,
No.
Councilman Oliva,
Yes.
Councilman Willerman,
Yes.
James Matro,
No.
and Chairman Marinelli.
Yes, motion carried. Application is approved as stated. Anything further, Mr. Solicitor?
Not on this application.
Not on this application. Thank you.
Thank you very much.
Thank you very much for everything. Members of the board, we have one resolution that's ready for adoption. It's application 1-20 zoning board. Application of Matthew and Sharika Newsom for use deed variance for the site plan approval for block 1901, lot 22. I need a motion to adopt.
So moved.
Mr. Messina first,
Second.
and Mr. Blair second. Roll call.
Michael Messina,
Yes.
Gordon Faribault,
Yes.
Mickey Palia,
Yes.
Ray Schipione,
Yes.
Councilman Oliva,
Abstain.
Councilman Willerman,
Abstain.
Bill Brinkerhoff,
Yes.
James Matro,
Abstain, I was at the last meeting.
and Chairman Marinelli.
Yes, motion carried. And application 1-20 zoning board is now adopted. And we have no further business, we have no zoning board issues, and we have no, at the present time, applications for the 17th. If we do, our next meeting is August 17th.
Chairman, I have a
Yes, sir.
small ministerial matter. The Hammonton Board of Education has a trailer that they, and I'll let the building official speak to it, on their facility, and the town is about to issue the CO. We asked for a explanation as to why they didn't need to appear before the planning board, the joint board. I received that explanation and agree with it, that they do not have to approve before this board. But as a courtesy, they said, listen, if you want us to informally appear for courtesy to the board, they will. And I guess the question is do you want them to appear even though they don't have to?
I don't think anything they do, they have to come before us, do they?
They don't. They don't. But the letter said, if you want us to, we will. And as a courtesy, I wanted to let you know that if you want them to, they will.
No, I mean, I would assume that when, they're going to be building on the classrooms, and then Ray might attest to more since I left the board, but they're going to be doing more additions and things like that, so they don't have to come here, but if they wanted to come when they get their classrooms planned together and show us that, then,
I'm sure they will.
we'd be more than happy to
Well,
talk to them.
Yeah, they will.
But for the trailer, I think it's okay, we could just, because they're going to remove it once the construction is done in about 5 or 6 weeks.
Meeting's adjourned. Thank you.